Princess Euryalus stood on the balcony of the royal palace, gazing out at the sprawling city of Gerathis below. The once great capital of the Gerath Dominion, a vast empire that spanned countless star systems, now felt like a hollow shell of its former glory. Her people had once been mighty, rulers of the galaxy, known for their advanced technology and fierce warriors. But now, as the empire teetered on the edge of collapse, the city felt silent, empty. Euryalus had always known her place. She was the princess, the future ruler of the Dominion. She was meant to inherit the throne from her father, Emperor Valar, who had ruled with strength and wisdom. But things had changed. Over the years, she had been given fewer responsibilities, fewer opportunities to prove herself. And it wasn't because she wasn't capable, it was because she was different. Euryalus had been born with a genetic condition that weakened her physically and mentally. The genetic flaw in her bloodline was rare, but it wasn't unheard of. The doctors and scientists who had examined her from birth said that she was still fit to rule, but deep down she knew they were only telling her that because she was royalty. She could never match the strength and intelligence of her people, her fellow Gerath, who had evolved to be the ultimate warriors and thinkers of the galaxy. While her father still loved her, he had never been as proud of her as he had been of her older brother Talon. Talon was strong, intelligent, and had the charisma to lead their people. He was everything the Gerath wanted in a ruler. Euryalus, on the other hand, was a disappointment. She could barely focus for long periods, and her body, though not weak, wasn't as quick or powerful as it should have been for someone of her royal blood. Every day she struggled just to keep up with the expectations placed on her. Her once joyful heart was now filled with bitterness. Euryalus had been rejected by many. Rejected by potential suitors who had looked past her flaws to see her as a means to gain power. Rejected by her own people, who saw her impairment as a weakness. She had heard the whispers in the palace hallways, behind closed doors, in the eyes of her people whenever she walked among them. They didn't see her as a leader. They saw her as a broken princess, a failure of an empire. As she stood there on the balcony staring into the city that was supposed to be her future, a small part of her longed for escape. She wanted to leave everything behind, to flee from her royal duties, from the expectations, and from the constant reminder that she wasn't good enough. But she couldn't. She was the heir. She was the only one left to carry the legacy of the Gerath Dominion. At that moment, the doors to her chamber opened quietly. A soft voice called out from the doorway. "Your Highness, you requested to be alone, but there is someone here to see you." Euryalus turned, startled. She had not expected visitors, especially not now. Her advisors and generals had long given up on offering her advice. Who could possibly want to see her now, when everything was falling apart? "Who is it?" Euryalus asked, her voice sounding colder than she had intended. "A human." "Your Highness," the servant replied. Euryalus raised an eyebrow in surprise. Humans. They were one of the many species in the galaxy, but they were of no real significance. They were a relatively young race, still developing their technologies and exploring the far reaches of space. The Gerath Dominion had ignored them for centuries, considering them little more than ants in the grand scheme of galactic power. "A human?" she repeated, her voice laced with curiosity. "Send him in." The servant bowed and stepped aside, allowing the figure in the doorway to enter. The human was tall and lean, his features sharp and determined. His uniform was a mixture of military style and practical gear, suggesting that he was some sort of soldier. He had short, dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look directly through her, as though he could see everything she had hidden within. Euryalus couldn't help but feel a twinge of surprise. She had never expected a human to approach her, let alone seek her out in the heart of the Gerath Empire. The human bowed low in respect, his eyes never leaving hers. "Princess Euryalus," he said with a calm, firm voice, "I am Captain Kale of the Terran Union. I've come to offer my services." Euryalus blinked, still uncertain of what was happening. "Your services?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Why would a human offer his services to a broken empire? Kale didn't flinch at her words, though they stung her more than she had expected. He was not offended. Instead, he simply answered, "I came to see if there was still hope for the Gerath Dominion. I know your empire is in turmoil, but I believe there is still potential here. I believe in you, your highness." Euryalus stared at him, unsure of what to say. She had never met a human before, and yet here was one offering his help. It was both strange and humbling. "And why would you believe in me?" she asked, her voice filled with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Kale stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "Because you are more than your impairment. You are a leader, Your Highness." "I can see that." Eurylus's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever said that to her before, not once. She had always been told she was weak, too fragile to lead, too broken to ever rule. And yet here was a human, someone from a race that had never been involved in the Jarath Dominion, telling her that she could be something more. "Why?" Euryllus asked, her voice softer now, tinged with vulnerability. "Why would you say that? What makes you think I'm more than just a failure?" Kale's eyes softened. "Because I've seen true leaders rise from places where no one thought it possible. And I believe that despite everything, you have the strength within you to unite your people. You just need to believe in yourself." Euryllus felt something stir deep within her. Could it be true? Could this human, this stranger from a faraway world, see something in her that she couldn't even see in herself? She started, but the words caught in her throat. What was she supposed to say? She was not sure whether to be insulted or to thank him. Kale continued, unflinching. "I'm not here to offer empty praise. I'm here to offer a partnership. Together we can help restore the Jarath Dominion, not through force or fear, but through something stronger." Euryllus stared at him, unsure of where this was leading. Could she really trust this human? Could she trust anyone at this point? But Kale's words had planted a seed of hope in her heart, something she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, Euryllus allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just the broken princess, where she wasn't defined by her flaws. But could she really rise above everything? Could she truly lead? Kale's steady gaze told her one thing. He believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to start believing in herself too. Euryllus sat in her chamber alone once more, her mind swirling with thoughts. The conversation with Captain Kyle had left her unsettled. She had dismissed his offer at first, thinking it was a simple gesture of sympathy, something born from pity. But as the hours passed, the sincerity in his eyes and the calm strength of his words lingered in her thoughts. Together, we can help restore the Jarath Dominion. Not through force or fear, but through something stronger, Kale had said. She had heard the same words from others before, counselors, generals, and even her father. But there was something different in Kale's voice. It wasn't just a plan for her empire. It was a belief in her as a leader, not as a broken princess, but as someone who could truly make a difference. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever believed in her like that. As the sun began to set over the capital, casting long shadows over the palace, Euryllus looked out the window once more. The city sprawled beneath her, its towering structures and gleaming spires a reflection of the once mighty empire she was meant to inherit. Now, it seemed more like a fading memory, a place she could never truly lead. The people, the nobles, the military, all had their doubts about her. They had made it clear over and over that her impairment was too much to overcome. She would never be the ruler her people needed. But then there was Kale, a human soldier from a species that was still learning its place in the galaxy, offering her something no one else had. A partnership, an alliance. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Her servant entered, bowing low. "Your Highness, Captain Kale is here. He requests to speak with you again," the servant said, his tone respectful. Euryllus took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had already dismissed Kyle once, but something told her that this time would be different. Something inside her wanted to believe in his offer, even if it meant stepping out of her comfort zone. "Send him in," she replied, her voice calm yet firm. A few moments later, Kale entered the room, his presence as steady as it had been before. He was dressed simply now, without his formal military uniform, but his posture was just as commanding. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since their initial meeting, Euryllus could see something new in his expression, determination mixed with a quiet hope. "Princess," Kale said, bowing his head slightly, "I won't waste your time. I know you've heard many offers like mine before, but I truly believe there's something worth fighting for here. Not just your empire, but you." Euryalus' heart fluttered at his words, but she kept her composure. She was a princess after all, and she had been trained to hide her emotions. "You believe in me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But why? Why do you think I'm different from all the others who've come before you?" Kyle stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Because I've seen what you don't see in yourself. I see strength, princess. A strength that has nothing to do with your physical abilities or the expectations of others. It's a strength born from resilience, from surviving everything the galaxy has thrown at you. It's a strength that doesn't need to be proven in battle. It's a strength that comes from within." Euryalus felt a warmth spread through her chest, though she didn't allow herself to show it. She had heard kind words before, but this felt different. Kale wasn't just speaking from pity, he was speaking from conviction. He truly believed in her. "But I'm broken," she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I'm not what they want me to be. I can't lead them the way my father did. I can't even think clearly half the time. I'm not—" "You're not broken," Kale interrupted gently. "You're just different, and that's what makes you valuable. You see the world differently than anyone else, princess, and that perspective, your perspective, can change everything." Euryalus' heart skipped a beat. She had spent so many years trying to prove she was enough, trying to prove to everyone that she was worthy of the throne. She had spent so many nights wondering if she would ever be good enough to lead her people. But Kale's words, simple yet powerful, were starting to make her question everything she had believed about herself. "How can you be so sure?" she asked, her voice shaking just slightly. "How do you know I'm not just a liability? How do you know I'm not just a burden to the Jarath?" Kale smiled, though it was a gentle, reassuring smile. "Because you're not alone in this, princess. You have me. And I'm not here to force you into anything. I'm here to offer you an opportunity. You don't have to be the perfect leader that everyone expects. You just need to be the leader that you are. I will stand by you every step of the way." Euryalus stared at him, her mind racing. Could it be true? Could someone, especially a human, really see her this way? It was all so new, so different from everything she had been told. Her entire life had been shaped by the expectations of others, by what her father, her people, and even the galaxy itself had expected of her. Could she break free from that? Could she be something else? Her heart was pounding in her chest, but for the first time in a long time, it wasn't because of fear. It was because of hope. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want to try." Kale's eyes softened and he took a step closer. "That's all I ask. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be willing to take the first step." Euryalus looked at him, her heart still unsure but her mind slowly coming to a realization. Perhaps Kale was right. Perhaps she didn't have to be perfect. Perhaps her flaws didn't define her. Perhaps the future wasn't about fitting into the mold of what others expected, but about creating something new, a future where she could lead on her own terms. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll take the first step." Kale's smile widened, and for the first time in a long while, Euryalus felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't a guarantee of success. It wasn't a promise that everything would work out perfectly. But it was a beginning that for once felt like it was hers to control. "Then let's begin," Kyle said, his tone confident. "Together." As they stood there, the tension in the room eased. Euryalus didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. A spark that perhaps with Kale's help she could build something new, something worth fighting for. The days that followed Kale's visit were a blur for Princess Euryalus. She spent hours in her private chambers contemplating everything he had said. There was a part of her that still doubted, still feared that she wasn't good enough, that her impairments would be her undoing. But that part of her was growing quieter, overshadowed by something else, a spark of hope, the kind of hope she hadn't felt in years. Kale's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to be perfect, princess. You just have to be willing to take the first step." And she had taken it. She had agreed to work with him, to see what this new path might hold. In the mornings, they met in the palace's training room. At first, Irilys felt awkward, unsure of how to even begin. Kyle was a soldier, experienced in combat while she had never been trained in such things. Her body didn't respond the way it should. Every movement felt slow, every decision clouded by doubt. But Kale didn't push her. He was patient. He taught her how to focus, how to control her breathing, how to think before reacting. "Don't just act," Kale would say, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "Think, assess the situation, and then move. Your mind is sharper than you realize." At first, Irilys struggled. She had always relied on others to make decisions for her. Her father, her advisors, even her brother. Everyone else seemed to have the answers. But Kale showed her that she had the ability to make her own decisions, to rely on her instincts. The more they trained, the more Irilys felt herself changing little by little. One afternoon, after hours of intense practice, Kale stood beside her, wiping the sweat from his brow. "That was good," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride.
"You're getting better."
"You're thinking more clearly." Irilys gave him a small, tired smile. "I didn't think I could do it," she admitted, her voice soft. "I didn't think I could ever be useful." Kyle turned to face her, his blue eyes meeting hers. "You've always been useful, Princess. You just needed to see it yourself. You needed to believe." His words warmed her heart, though she still struggled with her own self-doubt. But for the first time, she felt like she was making progress. Kale wasn't treating her like a fragile princess who needed to be protected. He was treating her like a partner, like someone capable of standing beside him and facing the challenges ahead. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. They shared stories of their worlds. Kale spoke of Earth, the human homeworld, of its bustling cities and the challenges his people faced. Irilys shared stories of her empire, the Jerath Dominion, and the ancient traditions that had shaped her people for centuries. They were so different yet so alike. Both had faced challenges. Both had been misunderstood in their own ways. One evening, after a particularly difficult training session, Irilys found herself sitting on the balcony again, looking out over the city. The stars were bright in the sky, and the cool breeze ruffled her dark hair. She had always loved the stars, even when she was younger. They had reminded her that there was more to the universe than her struggles, more to life than the burdens of royalty. Kyle joined her quietly, sitting beside her without saying a word. He had come to understand her silence, the way she would often retreat into her thoughts. For a long time, neither of them spoke. It was a comfortable silence, one that didn't need words to explain the bond they had begun to share. Finally, Irilys spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always felt like I was wrong, like I didn't belong in this place, in this life. But now when I train with you, I feel like I'm starting to understand something I never did before, that maybe I can belong. Maybe I can be something more than just a broken princess." Kale didn't say anything at first. He simply reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. After a long moment, he spoke softly, his voice steady. "You've always belonged, Irilys. You just needed to see it for yourself." Irilys turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. "And you? Why do you help me? I'm a princess of a dying empire. What could someone like you possibly see in me?" Kale looked at her, his expression serious yet filled with something softer. "I see strength, Irilys. I see someone who's been fighting for so long, not knowing if she could ever win. But I also see someone who's willing to try, someone who's willing to learn, to grow, and that in my eyes is the true mark of a leader." Irilys felt a lump form in her throat. For so long she had only seen her own failures, her own limitations. But Kale was showing her a different way of seeing herself, a way that was filled with possibility instead of doubt. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted quietly, "but I want to be. I want to fight for my people. I want to be the leader they deserve, not the one they expect." Kale gave her a small, encouraging smile. "You're already on your way. The fact that you're asking yourself these questions means you're ready." The days turned into weeks, and Irilys continued to train with Kale. She grew stronger, both physically and mentally. The fog that had clouded her mind began to lift, and she started to feel a sense of clarity she had never experienced before. She wasn't just the princess anymore. She wasn't just the broken heir to a fading empire. She was someone with a purpose, someone who could lead. Kyle, too, seemed to be changing. He was more than just a soldier now. He was her partner, her equal. He had never once treated her like a fragile princess, and that made all the difference. He believed in her when no one else had. His faith in her was unwavering, and it gave her the strength to believe in herself. One evening, as they stood together on the training grounds, Kale turned to her with a serious expression. "The situation with the Jarath Dominion is worsening," he said. "Your people are growing restless. The factions within the Empire are fighting for control, and if something isn't done soon, there will be civil war. You need to act before it's too late." Irilys nodded, her expression grim. She had known this day was coming. The whispers of rebellion had grown louder with each passing day. Her people were desperate for a change, and many no longer believed in her ability to lead. But Kale's presence gave her the courage to act. She wasn't alone, and together they could make a difference. "I know," she said quietly, "but I can't do it alone. I need help, Kale. I need to unite my people even if they don't want to be united." Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. "You're not alone. I'm with you always." The weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time, Irilys didn't feel overwhelmed. She didn't feel like a failure. She felt like a leader. She felt ready. The night was quiet, but tension hung thick in the air over Jarathis, the capital of the Jarath Dominion. The city, once filled with the sounds of bustling markets and proud celebrations, was now on edge. The factions within the Empire were growing more restless, the rumors of rebellion spreading like wildfire. Princess Irilys stood at the window of her private chamber, looking out at the dark horizon, her mind racing. The time had come. She could feel it deep in her bones. The empire she had once known, an empire that had looked to her for leadership, was crumbling. And it was up to her to decide whether she would stand by and watch it fall, or take charge and fight for its future. Kale stood beside her, as he had in so many of their training sessions, offering quiet support. He had been with her every step of the way, helping her find the strength within herself that she had long buried. Together they had trained for this moment, preparing not only for battle but for something far more important, the leadership she would need to unite her people. "You're ready, Gralis," Kale said, his voice calm and steady as always. "Your people need you. They need to know that you're willing to stand up for them, even if it means going against everything that's been expected of you." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "But what if they don't believe in me? What if they reject me like everyone else has?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. "I don't want to fail them." "You won't fail them," Kyle replied, his blue eyes locked onto hers. "You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest with them, with yourself. You've already shown them your strength. Now you need to show them your heart." Irilys took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle into her chest. She had spent so many years trying to live up to the impossible standards of her people, but now she understood. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. She couldn't change who she was, but she could change the way she led, and for the first time she felt ready to try. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firmer now. "Let's go." The palace courtyard was filled with soldiers, nobles, and advisors, all standing in a tense, expectant silence. They had gathered to hear what Irilys had to say. Many of them had doubted her for years, questioning her ability to lead. But today she would show them who she truly was. Kale stood at her side as they approached the grand balcony overlooking the courtyard. The crowd below grew silent, waiting for her to speak. Irilys felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she didn't let it stop her. She had to do this for her people, for her empire, and for herself. She stepped forward to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the faces of the Jarath who had once rejected her. Their eyes were filled with skepticism, but there was also something else: curiosity. They were waiting to see if she would falter, waiting to see if the broken princess would fall short once again. Irilys raised her voice, steady and clear. "I know many of you have doubted me. I know that in the past I have not lived up to the expectations you have placed on me. I know that some of you see me as weak, as a failure." The crowd stirred, murmurs rippling through the air. Irilys took a deep breath, her mind clear now, her resolve hardening. "But I am not a failure," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I am a leader, and I will fight for this empire. I will fight for all of you. I will fight for the future of the Jarath Dominion." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces below her. I may not be perfect. I may not be what you expected me to be, but I am here and I will not let this empire fall. We have the power to rise above our divisions, to unite and build something stronger. Together we can do more than survive, we can thrive. The silence that followed was deafening. Relis held her breath, waiting for their response. She had put everything on the line. She had given them the truth of who she was, and now it was up to them to decide if they would stand with her. After what felt like an eternity, one of the older generals, a respected figure within the Dominion, stepped forward. His face was hard, his eyes filled with uncertainty, but when he spoke, his voice was firm. "You are right, Princess," he said. "We have been divided for too long. The Empire cannot stand if we continue to fight amongst ourselves. We need leadership. And if you are willing to fight for us, then we will stand with you." Relis felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had expected resistance, but the general's words were a turning point. One by one, others in the crowd began to speak up, offering their support. The nobles, the soldiers, even the people of the lower ranks, all of them began to rally behind her. It wasn't just her royal blood that they saw anymore. It was her courage, her determination, and her willingness to fight for the future. As the voices of support grew louder, Relis felt a new strength take root within her. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a leader who had earned the trust of her people. And together they would face the challenges ahead. The following days were filled with meetings, plans, and discussions. Relis worked tirelessly, alongside Kale and her newly united advisors, to organize a coalition of support. They needed to restore order, to quell the rebellion that threatened the very foundations of the Empire. It would take time, but Relis was determined. She knew that the first step was to show her people that she wasn't just the broken princess they once thought she was. She was someone who could lead them through the storm. Kale remained by her side throughout it all, offering his wisdom and his strength. He had never once doubted her, and his belief in her gave her the courage to keep going. They worked together, not as a princess and her soldier, but as partners, equals who shared the same goal. As the weeks passed, the situation began to stabilize. The factions within the Empire, seeing the strength of Relis's leadership, started to settle their differences. The rebellion that had once seemed inevitable was now a distant memory. The Jarath Dominion, though still fragile, had a chance to rebuild. And it was all thanks to the broken princess who had refused to give up. One evening, as Relis stood on the balcony once more, looking out over the city, Kyle joined her. The stars were shining brightly above, and the air was cool and calm. The Empire still had much to do, but they had made it through the worst of it. "You did it," Kyle said softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. Relis turned to face him, a small smile on her lips. "We did it," she corrected, her voice steady. "We're just getting started." Kyle smiled back, his eyes filled with a warmth that made her heart swell. Together they had faced the impossible. Together, they had risen above the doubts and fears that had once threatened to tear everything apart. And now they were ready for whatever the future held.